like growing up, you just want to be the same as everybody else, you know? Especially like coming from me and from you, I know, coming from parents who are immigrants to the country, you know? You just want to fit in, and this is like the ultimate not
Right,
not fitting in, you know? We
right.
needed like safe adult, safe profession, safe medical, mental professionals to be like, this is what's going on. You know, this is how to talk about it. Yeah, somebody to validate us, and we deserve that. And they didn't show up.
This interview is very interesting for me too because of the immigration factor, because our parents migrated to Western countries. And so that situation in itself is so challenging for our parents because they have little kids that they have to take care of, but then there's the cultural shock, the rejection from mainstream society, there's racism. We suffered from a lot of racism, and there's also the daily struggles, which when you put all of these factors together, they devastate anybody's mental health. But when you're an immigrant, you're in a country where you don't speak the language, you're not fitting in, you've become a minority, your circle is gone. You don't have a family that you can fall back on and just vent and say, man, I'm angry about this, or I'm really sad about that, or I'm really worried about how I'm going to take care of my kids, because you have children that are dependent on you. And so I know that that had to have exacerbated my mum's mental health, because she didn't speak English. There was a language barrier, not only with the nation's language, which is English, but with my dad's family, who are Chinese. My mum didn't speak Cantonese. And when she started working, other immigrants would be racist toward my mum. And she was depressed. And that's when it was just like everything came together and exploded into schizophrenia.
Yeah, that's so hard. It's so hard. And yeah, to not even have community in, oh, we're all outsiders, you know, that breaks my heart. That breaks my heart for your mom.
Yeah.
Was there like a Mexican community near where you grew up or anything?
There was a small Mexican community, but as my mum began to be more ill, she isolated. And that's something that I see, that it happens a lot with people with schizophrenia. They start to shy away from their communities and they end up isolating themselves. And so the people that are left are really the children. And if they're gone,
Yeah.
they're on their own. A lot of schizophrenics also end up homeless, which is just devastating because that life is so harsh. But
Yeah.
I know that when my mum arrived, she really tried. And that's sad because,
Yeah.
my parents as immigrants, and I mean, this, it's just so hard to uproot a family and uh, take them halfway across the world, looking for a better opportunity for the family. And and then you arrive and it's just you're faced with obstacle after obstacle, and they're emotional blows, they're mental blows
Yeah.
that I think this is kind of my crazy way of summing all of this up. Is I just feel like schizophrenia is the ultimate pinnacle of so many emotional blows. It's like the mind can't take one more emotional trauma, and so it fragments, and there's an alternate reality that they can
Yeah.
face, which are the voices. And perhaps I'm wrong, but I've read a lot. I've seen my mum. I I'm almost done reading this book called Madness: Schizophrenia Across Cultures. And there are so many overlapping feelings that the immigrants had, which is, they were minorities. They had lost their community. They were
Yeah.
isolated, and they probably had a lot of emotional baggage from before. and then you come to a country that you're not stabilizing,
Yeah.
and you're a mum with two kiddies
Yeah.
going, mum, I need this and I need that.
Yeah.
And the cultural barrier, because that's another thing that a lot of people don't mention these things, but the cultural barriers really prevent you from integrating, because you're kind of
Yeah.
like, well, what is this, and that takes time. When you migrate, it is a process, but then there's so much that somebody can take. And I think that that's what happened with my mum, that it overwhelmed her. It just bulldozed her.
Yeah. I, and like and now I'm 34. I can't imagine going to like making the decision to be like, I will leave this place where I've grown up and I understand the culture and everything, and like go somewhere else for a better opportunity. Like I know that takes a lot of like courage to do that. And I can't imagine like how lonely it is. Like I have a lot of like titos and titas who they knew back home and everything, who also came to Jersey, so they had that small community. But yeah, I don't know what it's like to raise kids in a culture that they don't know, that they
Right.
of all the things they couldn't teach me, neither of them could teach me. Here's how to like grow up being a boy in America. Like that's just something I had to figure out, on my own.
Exactly. Well, because that's such an important point. Your parents couldn't really uh, throw you into their culture and their traditions because they weren't in their country. I mean, they could keep a lot of traditions, but then you're faced with the most important one, which is the country in which you're living, and then you're trying to assimilate, but they can't actually give you, they can't help you in that process because they're not part of that culture themselves. It's so
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only been recently where I'm trying to like embrace my Filipino side. I always associated it with like growing up and like all the problems. I tied it to that, and it was like I have to push it away. But as I get older, it's like no, like it's a part of me. Like my family isn't the only way to be Filipino, and like I want to find the parts from growing up I still hold dear and like fill in the gaps of like Philippine history, Philippine American history, and like learn about my culture in that way, and like make it important to me in you know in the way that feels right to me. And I'm glad I got to that point, and it's not just something I wanted to push away forever.
Right. Because those are your roots, and
Yeah.
it's something that you should be proud of. When you're a child, and I definitely was a minority in school. I mentioned this when we spoke last week. I was targeted for being Chinese, and my brother was targeted for being Mexican. And we were the minorities, but we were targeted for being these two ethnicities, but we looked Filipino, Maori, Tongan, Kiwi. So there was also an identity barrier as well, because we didn't look like anybody else at school. I mean, the Chinese community looked Chinese. I was Chinese, but I looked Filipino. So it's a funny thing. There's so many factors. I mean, everybody's story is so layered. It's completely layered. And I think that now as an adult that you want to pursue your own culture and traditions, and you should be proud of that, because that is part of our parents' inheritance. Those are your genes, that is your ethnic background. And like you said, not just look for the Filipino part through your family, but maybe finding other activities, because I know that you've been very
Yeah.
proactive in your healing, and you go to meetings, and you're constantly looking for resources, which I love. And that speaks well of you, because you're not going to be stagnant. And well, this is life, and yeah, I'm kind of struggling, or I'm not okay, but you're really pursuing the journey of healing, which I want to ask you what else you're doing. But I think that tenacity that you've had, you can take that in pursuing your culture and making it your own.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's important to me. As you were talking, I just think about how much I love the food. Food was like the one always comfort, growing up, like a good meal, a nice like beverage was like such an oasis in the madness.
Yeah.
So a lot of comfort in Filipino food growing up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I find that too in the Chinese food that it didn't matter what was going on. We had our
Yeah.
our typical meals that we really enjoyed too, because our childhoods weren't 100% shit.
Mm.
That's the only way that I can put it now. They weren't
Yeah.
100% bad, and they weren't 100% good, and there were things that you know when I think back, I can laugh at, and other experiences that you can cherish. But there were so many experiences that were so burdening on the heart and the soul. And food was definitely also one of the good things. So maybe even, I don't know, cooking classes. I mean, like I said, you're very tenacious, so you'll find a way to really get back into uh well, not back into, because it's who you are, but really adopting that for yourself as your own identity.
Yeah. Oh, cooking classes, that's definitely on there. I hope I can find like, okay, here are like the dishes you probably ate growing up, Filipino dishes. We're gonna take a number of weeks and cook them all. Oh, I would love to find something like that. To meet other people who are like, yeah, I love this growing up. I buy it at the restaurant, but yeah, I wanna like, how can I make it my own, you know?
And I'm sure you'll find other immigrants, because you're first generation. I'm sure you're going to find other first generation Filipinos where you'll
Oh,
have
I bet.
other specific things that only you'll have in common with them that they'll understand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great thing of opening yourself up to that possibility, because
Yeah.
you are very open. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So what else are you doing in terms of, I mean, I know I've pursued meditation, I've gone to spiritual retreats, I've done therapy, psychoeducation resources, and I created this channel, and I created it also on Facebook. So what have you been doing? And this would be really great for um, people who are watching, that can say, oh, perhaps that's an option for me as well.
Yeah, well, what have I done solo on my own? Yeah, meditation. I was running for a while, working out. Those were helpful. Journaling was very helpful. I really got to get back into those. I've fallen off of those. I do solo therapy. I do EMDR, and I
Mm.
do like body based somatic therapy with my solo therapist, and she's great. And I really wanted to find somebody who like specifically worked on childhood trauma because I feel like that's what I needed. Where it wasn't they're not just trauma informed. They're like, yeah, I do like childhood trauma, not like you were in a tornado or or something like that because it's very particular. And the thing I've been doing for like the last 18 months is this group therapy I keep talking about. My therapist, she's great, and having like other people who are invested in like getting better, I feel like it's really been like the next level in my healing. It's sort of based around different modules. Like the very first module, it's sort of like homework is make a family tree of dysfunction. Talk about, hey, what did your mother's grandfather think of your father, if you knew at all? I don't. What did mom's siblings think of each other? To like sort of show like, oh, like your immediate nuclear family. It's not the only thing going on in your family, to sort of give you that wider lens, you know? With that first assignment, also seeing other people break down their families, again, it's like it's very validating to see other people's families, even though they're wildly different from my own. The second one was like writing a letter to a parent, you know, and then you'd read it to the group. Here, I put like an empty chair next to me and I'd read it. I wrote it to my dad, and like
Hmm.
having my group mates and having the therapist say things to my dad, you know, that I wished they could say to him in person. But it was still very cathartic to like be to know like these people are on my side, you know?
Right.